I'm actually 27 now because it was my birthday, but that's okay. So, good evening. My name is Lais. I'm really excited to be here today. I want to thank the organizers for this privilege. And today I'm going to give a talk about defining a customizable boilerplate using Django, React, and Bootstrap. So a little bit about me. I'm from Recife, Brazil. I am a developer at Vinta Software. A great experience I had was being a part of the Recurse Center. The Recurse Center is a community-driven programmers retreat in New York. If you never heard of it, you should check it out. I'm also currently organizing Django Girls Recife. We'll have it probably in May or June. And I'm interested in many things like user experience and front-end development and Django. Okay, so let's start. So this is Recife, and this is me at Vinta. And around last year at Vinta, Vinta is a software shop. So there was a moment last year where we had many new projects at the same time, and this is something that happens quite often. So we were faced with the problem that we had to set the initial environment of those projects, and this was becoming a very time-consuming task for us. So we realized that a lot of these projects, they had a similar set of features, and that we could really benefit from using a boilerplate. It was a long process for us. We tried to search a lot, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that experience during this talk. But in the end, we decided to create our own. So before we used the boilerplate, it could take us from 1 day to 3 days to set up the initial environment, depending on what technologies we were integrating. And now it takes us like an hour or two. So we had a significant time gain, and this was really beneficial, not only to us, the developers, to the company, but also to the clients. And hopefully someone here will gain something as well. Okay, so first we need to understand the concept of what is a boilerplate. The definition says that a boilerplate refers to sections of code that have to be included in many places with little or no alteration. And this is a very generic explanation. To give an example, the most simple example that I can give you is the basic structure of an HTML document. This is a boilerplate because anytime you want to reuse it, you can just copy and paste it. And in the Django concept, the project template is also a boilerplate. So every time you run the command Django admin start project, what you're doing is you're generating the basic Django project with the project name that you passed in the command. So the very idea of using a boilerplate is already embedded in Django. This is a tweet from Sean Larkin. This was from Twitter's Developers Confessions. And he said, "Hi, I'm Sean, one of the maintainers for Webpack, and I've never set hot module replacement without a boilerplate before." So this is what I want to show is that this is something people use. This is not a new concept or something that I'm creating now. And why should you use a boilerplate? What are the benefits of doing so? There are several benefits. To name a few, the first is because you shouldn't repeat yourself. The dry principle is a very popular programming principle I'm sure many of you have heard of. And I believe that it should apply not only to your code, but also to your daily practices. And the most obvious benefit is because you'll speed up your initial project setup. And this is something that I mentioned already in the beginning, that we could gain from days to hours. And I'm sure that setting up the initial environment is a hazard that every programmer has experienced at some point of their lives. But even though those are the obvious benefits, they're not the only ones. You will also be less prone to errors, because as developers, we are humans and we make mistakes, and it's very easy for us to forget to do something or to commit a typo, and just having everything ready to go makes it so much easier. You will also comply with good practices, because if the project is well structured, it will reflect good guidelines of the company, of the team that is working on it. And this way, if a new developer joins the project, it will be easier for him to understand different projects of the same company, because you will have a standard. And you will also incline to use state-of-the-art tools. If you're either using an open source project or if you're using a project that is maintained by a team, this team will be updating the tools. And this is a hard task, to keep everything updated to the latest versions. And as I've said, this is not a new concept, and there are popular projects out there. You might be familiar. There is the HTML5 boilerplate. This is a very popular front-end solution. It is front-end only. You can download it, and you'll get an index file. You get the assets folders, and some other things like Google Analytics. We also have Cookie Cutter Django. This is a project by Paideni. He's the author of 2 Scoops of Django. It is a great project. It has Django 1.10. It has Bootstrap 4. It supports Docker and Heroku. And although all these projects, they are great projects, when we were at Vinta, the context we were living, they did not fit our needs. So after searching a lot, we decided that it was important for us to build our own. And this is how we created the Django and React boilerplate. This is an open source project. Anyone can contribute to. In this project, we use Django 1.10, we use React, we use Bootstrap 4, and we use also webpack, and we have a lot of different features. And the main reason here we wanted to create this project was because while we were searching, we couldn't find a good project that integrated Django and React. And this was something that we really needed, and that it was hard for us. If you do know a boilerplate with Django and React, please let me know. So this was a great project, but I contributed to the project, but I didn't do it alone. It is the gathered knowledge of 8 developers at Vinta, the company I work for. So not everything is good, obviously. So there are high maintenance costs to creating a boilerplate. Like any open source project, as you're aware, there are costs. It's really hard to maintain, and very easily things can become outdated because we are integrating a lot of different tools. So unless you have a team of developers that can continuously work on it, that have the energy to work on the project, this is something that is hard to maintain by yourself. So in my opinion, I would advise that you try to find an open source project that fits your needs. And maintaining it updated is especially true because of JavaScript packages. This is something we've learned very easily. We would update a package and everything would break in our build. So during that time, during that experience, we learned a lot. And we learned what to look for and what we wanted to include. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that experience of things that we find important to have in a project starter. And the first thing is you have to have well-defined principles, and you have to look for those principles because they should be enforced in the project. As a coincidence, at the same time that we were working on this project, we were also working on Vinta's playbook. So timing was great for us because we could use all that content that we were generating and we could apply and reflect it in the project. Just to give a little example of principles that are important to us, this is just an example. We have a very extensive guideline, but these are things like componentize to decouple, to keep it simple, sweetie, to have the dry principle, like I mentioned, and to have separation of concerns. And having the principles, you need to know which set of features you want and which set of features that you need in most projects you work on. And even though some things are specific, like interactive user interfaces, you might not need them in every project, there are some things that you should always have, like logging or performance monitoring, especially if you're running something in production. But this is just the generic features. You need to choose tools to serve those features. And these are the tools we've chosen. Like PyDany, we also use Django 1.10 and Bootstrap 4. We also use React, Webpack. And we chose these tools because they were well-established tools. React is an open source project for Facebook. It's used by Facebook, by Twitter, Pinterest, Airbnb. Papertrail, that we use for logging, is used by GitHub. And having that, we could look for additional things that would assure quality to our projects. And things like linters, for example. If you don't know, linters, they will analyze code for potential errors. So things like if you forgot an import, or if there's an import that is unused, or if the line is too long, or if the indentation is wrong, or you have an undefined name. And we do those security checks on the Python side with Flake8, and also on the JavaScript side with ESLint. And we also created a custom linter that we run that is called has missing migrations. And we did this because this is something that it happened a lot. Developers would forget to run the make migrations command, and so things would break. So those are the kind of things that are important. And having linters, another thing that we also use and that we feel is important are pre-commit hooks. So pre-commit hooks will commit safely. It will analyze for linters and also for conflict merges, or if you're trying to upload a very large file that you probably shouldn't. So it will prevent you from committing something that if the security check does not pass. We use for this an open source project called Precommit. It has a lot of checks, and you can also extend those checks. And this is an optional feature in a sense that if you're in a situation where you have to commit, even though you know something is broken, then you can skip it. So don't be worried thinking that it's too radical. And following the same idea, another thing that I feel is important is having continuous integration and delivery. And continuous integration and delivery will assure that all the safety checks passes, and those safety checks are the linters, but also tests and builds. And if you have, for example, a main branch, every time you're merging to this main branch, it will run your checks, and if the checks passes, then we know that this branch can be automatically deployed. And this is great because we're continuously delivering for the clients. For this, we use Circle CI, and it's also a tool used by many companies like Facebook and Kickstarter. And then if you're deploying, it's important that the project starter assure easy deploys. And how do we do that? How can we facilitate it? Things to look for are configuration files for the deploys, like app.json for Heroku or a proc file. And on the Django side, what we do is, in this sense, instead of having a single settings file, we divide the settings according to the environment. So we have a local settings, a production settings, and a test settings. And this is all set in the boilerplate already. And on the architecture side, on the structure that we are enforcing, this is where we will reflect those principles that I mentioned in the beginning. And how do we do that? Well, we do it on the back end, but also on the front end side. On the front end, we create all folders, and we have a defined structure. And we have, for example, we try to style components. And this way, we are componentizing, and we have helpers for common and shared code. We use SAS, just to be clear. And we have a variables file where we define every value of the styling. So this way, the developer has a single source to go to if he wants to change a color or a font. And on the back end, one thing we do is, for example, we leave the templates folder on the root of the project, because this way the front-end developer knows exactly where he has to find the files he will work on, and it's not on each app. And besides the structure and the folders, we go a little bit ahead, and we also include some shared code. And we can have some utility code, like this model, like an index timestamp model, which will log your instances to know when they were created or modified. And this is something that is generic. It doesn't depend on the project. This is something we always do. We always want our models to have. And following the same idea, following the same idea, we have a base user models. And if you see, it inherits from the index timestamp model. And I believe the cookie cutter Django also has a user's model. And this is also reflected on the front end. We have all the files, the base structure files that we need on the front end, like typography files and all our helpers files. And this way, we believe that developers will know the responsibility of each file, and each piece of front-end code will have an unambiguous location. And we also, other things we also include are the base HTML file and things like a Google Tag Manager snippet, because this is something clients always require. So we thought, why not just have it in the project starter? And I believe the HTML5 boilerplate also has, I think it's a Google Analytics snippet. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our framework choices. As I've mentioned, we use Django, React, and Bootstrap 4. And there are some aspects of them that facilitated the use of a boilerplate, and also some aspects that made the integration hard. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the experience and how we solved some problems. First, Django. Django is really great because I mentioned that it has the project template, and many developers don't know this, but this project template is extensible in a sense that you can tell the Django admin start project command which template you want to use. So instead of just using the Django's base project template, and you can pass this as arguments, and this can be a path, it can be a directory, or an URL. And this is great because here we're just passing the GitHub address of the project, and this way you're not adding any extra step to the developer. He doesn't have to download anything. He's just starting the project the same way that he already would. And also, something we use a lot is, in the same idea, in the start project command, we have the project name available in the template context. So we can use this anywhere that we need. like in the base settings files or in the package.json, and we use it in proc files in many different files. And this is the same idea that Django uses with its project template. And a little bit about React. React is, well, it's not technically a framework. I'm just using the term loosely here. It is a JavaScript library for building interactive user interfaces, single-page applications, that idea. So you can build things similar to these. I will not get into details because we don't have much time. And just to show you a little comparison of what a Django template and a React component would look like. And if you notice, React isn't exactly JavaScript, it's JSX. And because of this, it's like the merge of JavaScript and HTML. And because of this, we can write things like this. React is composable, and the components handle their own state. And it wasn't easy to integrate Django and React. This was the main motivation for us to have a boilerplate. And we did it using webpack and the Django webpack loader, and we used also npm to handle JavaScript package dependencies, and we used Babel. Because React is JSX, we have to transpile it to JavaScript so browsers can understand, and also, oops. And also one thing that I want to mention is that Webpack, Revo talked a little bit about it, but Webpack is a model bundler. It is, in my opinion, not an easy tool to understand right away. I feel like once you get it, it becomes easier, but until you're there in that point, it can take some time. I had to read the documentation many times until I was like, oh, okay. So we had a learning curve with this. And we follow the same idea that we follow for Django, and we have separate configuration files according to the environment. And this is great because locally we can use things like a hot module replacement plugin, and what it will do is it will inject updates in the code without needing, you won't need to refresh to see that a value changed or that something updated. And this is, we can have this only locally, and only on the production side, we actually generate the bundle files. So we're not committing bundle files to the repository, and this way, the repository is not polluted with compiled code. And we have to compile not only React, but also, because we use Sass, and we have to compile it to CSS. So far, even though it was hard to understand in the beginning, we've really enjoyed being using Webpack. And Bootstrap 4 is the framework we use for the styling part. If you don't know what Bootstrap is, you probably have seen a page similar to this. It is a front-end framework, a CSS JavaScript framework, and it gives you a lot of components. So you can have buttons and navigation bars and models and accordions. And it is what we use for the styling front-end part and to have some of these components. And to integrate, we also integrate using Webpack, and we use a Bootstrap loader. Using a Bootstrap loader has been good because we have, with this, a Bootstrap RC file, a configuration file, where we can choose which components that we want to use. Because Bootstrap is a large framework and we have a lot of components, not always we need to use everything. For example, not necessarily you need alerts. So this way, we're choosing exactly what we'll need in each project, and it's easy to do this because it's in a single file. And there are other things that you can set as well. You can set a configuration called post-CSS just to have auto prefixer. And another cool thing about it, I'm specifying that we use Bootstrap 4, And I'm doing this because Bootstrap 4 is built with Sass. Bootstrap 3 was built with Lais, and we used to use Sass at Vinta. So when Bootstrap 4 was released and it used Sass, it was great for us because with Sass, we can just override Bootstrap's default values for styling. So in a single custom Bootstrap file, we can change the body color or the root font size, and this makes just customizing Bootstrap so much easier than it was previously for us. And this is a feature that I enjoy a lot. So, summarizing a bit, my advice would be if you can, avoid writing from scratch unless you have the energy and the time, and especially because tools change really fast, so your project can really easily become outdated. And you'll probably need help to keep up with those changes. It's hard to do it by your own. And even though it's hard, it is necessary in many cases, like it was for us. And it's important because not even Sean Larkin can remember certain things. Thank you. I just want to show one more thing. I just want to show you one more thing. This is a project we created, I believe, last week. And it's an awesome boilerplate. The idea is that if you know a boilerplate, it doesn't need to be Django. You should go there and contribute just so we know what people are doing out there. So thank you.
Thank you, Lais.